Hello, I'm Frank Wright for LifeSite News. Days after the British people and the world were stunned by the release of footage showing the shocking murder of Henry Novak, who complained of being stabbed, only to be told by police, "I don't think you have, mate," then turned over and handcuffed to die in the street, a further atrocity appears on our screens. Late last night, an African man attempted to behead one of our people in Belfast. The shocking video footage spread through social media platforms today. This is yet another atrocity visited upon us, the British people, in our own homelands, by people who simply should not be here. Initially described as a Somali and then as a Sudanese, it appears that the attacker, who on the video attempts to saw off a man's head with what appears to be a large knife, was given leave to remain under an arrangement that appears to have been conducted under the previous Boris Johnson government. These leave to remain visas were permissioned under a regime that was also supervised by the current Reform front benchers Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick. What possible remedy would the British people have to their dire predicament from the architects of their doom today? One might well ask if there indeed is any hope from the party of a man increasingly referred to as Nigel Mirage, a shallow populist figure who appears to be unwilling to endorse the kind of mass deportations that would return Britain to the British, and which is the promise of the rival Restore Party surging in the polls today. Rupert Lowe of Restore Britain has called for restraint on the streets, saying not to deliver Keir Starmer the victory that his lying press wishes to see. Instead, he has said that a Restore Britain government would not only reverse mass migration, but would put, with the will of the state, this attempted murderer to death immediately. This was also the response of Rupert Lowe MP to the murder of Henry Novak. The position of Restore is inflexible and clear. The death penalty, with the will of the British people, will be reintroduced and applied in these cases. And the millions of people that have been permitted to come into our country against the consent of successive elections since 1997, those people will be sent home. For it is quite clear now that if these people do not go home, we and our children will never have one. Sadly, when I reported on the murder of Henry Novak, I said, this will not be the last atrocity that we see. Even I could not have expected such horrific scenes to hit our screens merely days after I made that statement. It is clear by now that the liberal technique by which we have been ruled of creating appalling conditions for us to inhabit and then criminalising their mention is no longer functioning, and is indeed undermining public trust both in the police and the legitimacy of the state itself. Keir Starmer, the British Labour Party leader and Prime Minister, has called for calm and to allow the police to do their job. Of course, the British people saw the police doing their job as they handcuffed a dying man and refused to tend to his wounds after he had been stabbed, precisely because the man who murdered him had accused him of being a racist. What possible justice can the British expect from their police and their government under these circumstances? It is an almost inhuman task to remain civilised in such barbaric and insane times, but it remains to be stated that the awful situation that we live in is the product of insane liberal policies going back decades, which have effectively criminalised any mention of those awful conditions and their causes, which is the policies of the successive governments which have ruled us into a permanent state of emergency. The national crisis in Britain is indeed grave. It requires swift, responsible action by men and women of integrity who put duty before country and the saving of the nation before the self. And this is what many people now believe is represented by Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain. The hour is late. The time for moderate, humane and efficient remedies to these problems is growing short. The British people are faced with an existential crisis permissioned by the insane liberals who have taken power of all their institutions. Enough is enough, say many British people today, both on the internet and in real life. The legendary patience of our peoples is being sorely tried. How long will we have to wait before further horrific scenes hit our screens? How long will the British people be content to sit and watch? These murders are the direct result of decades of mass migration undertaken against the will of British people. As in every election since 1997, the majority of the British people have demanded limits to or an end to mass migration. However, between 1997 and 2024, some estimated 18.5 to 19 million people arrived in the country despite the so-called will of the people as expressed through the Liberal electoral system. It is clear that we are not ruled by a democratic government, but by a Liberal elite whose policies of permanent government have continued regardless of elections and against the popular will. We, the British people, are now the victims of our own government in our own streets as a direct result of the insane policies that they've been following for years. If the politics of national suicide does not end soon, then we may all be delivered into an unsalvageable mess of universal vengeance to which there could be no end. The national emergency is grave. The time to remedy it is short. Yet what has been done by policy can be done by its reversal. Practically no one has any confidence, naturally, given its past actions, in the current British government to admit that it has made these terrible mistakes and to reverse them. It remains to be seen what will happen in Belfast streets tonight, and it would be miraculous if there were no repercussions. Though calm has been wisely advised, and though it is completely reckless to commit acts of criminal damage and violence, even in the justifiable anger caused by these events, it is difficult to see how public sentiment, continually provoked by almost daily supplies of horrific atrocities, tales of stabbings, murders and rapes of our children going back decades, to see how long the British can contain their legendary resolve, self-discipline and patience. With God's help, the British people will soon be rid of this satanic menace, which has captured all their institutions and has delivered us into a routine evil that has been normalised by decades of policy. One of the ways in which the Liberal system rules us is by making the obvious unsayable. This is a political technique which convinces that the system is inescapable, which is also a lie. This delivers people into fear, dependence, despair, addiction and misery. Today, the British people say, we have had enough. It is time to state the case, reverse the policies of national suicide and to save the nation. For the British people realise that if these sane and just measures are not undertaken swiftly, it looks very much like we'll be finished. And it seems impossible to ask any man or woman of good conscience on these islands or anywhere to accept such a fate quietly. I'm Frank Wright for LifeSite News. God bless you all. Do not despair. You are not obliged to go insane in an insane system. We must refuse universal barbarism, though it may take a near superhuman effort of self-discipline to do so. Please try to remember that every one of us captured by the enemy is one less soldier in the fight to save the nation. God bless you all.
This is kind of incredible. LifeSite News not allowed. Of course, the pro-lifers.
You just heard Tucker confirm what we've known for years. LifeSite News is being blacklisted for telling the truth. The truth about abortion, the truth about politics, the truth about the Catholic faith. And powerful people want those truths silenced. But while big tech and the media may try to shut us down, they cannot stop us as long as faithful supporters like you stand with us. LifeSite News takes no money from big government or corporate interests. We depend on you alone. That's why your donation matters so much. Whether it's $25, $50, $500, every gift keeps truthful, faithful journalism alive. Go to lifesitenews.com today and help give truth the victory.